Hey everyone, welcome to another daily editorial here on the KE Report. This is a special video daily editorial as I am getting an update and more of a 2024 preview from Capella Minerals. I am joined by the president and CEO, Eric Roth. Capella Minerals is traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol CMIL and on the OTCQB under the symbol CMILF, as well as the Frankfurt Exchange under the symbol N7D2. Now, Capella Minerals, copper and lithium focus in Finland, but we will also be talking about some of the company's assets in Norway, which later on in this year, the company sold those projects to NickelX. So Eric has put together a couple slides to take us through more of an overview of these projects and what work is going to be done to move them forward. So Eric, thank you very much for joining me today, and thank you for putting together these slides. As we transition into the first slide, we will go through the normal disclaimer that everyone can see. But when it comes to the project portfolio here, Eric, let's start off with this map, and let's start off in Norway with that deal where the company sold the projects, the more copper-focused projects, to NickelX. Just remind everybody of this deal, please.
Yeah, thanks, Corey, and great to be here, and a big welcome to all the listeners as well, too. So, as you mentioned, one of the big news pieces for us was back in October. So we did announce a deal where the strategy was to basically combine our copper assets, our high-grade massive sulfide copper assets in central Norway, together with a portfolio of nickel assets from northern Norway, which are held by NickelX, and put that combined entity onto the Oslo Exchange. So the idea basically was to create a 100% Norwegian listed, 100% obviously managed, and with 100% Norwegian projects as well too. So the concept here was to create a fully Norwegian battery metals company. So where we are in that deal, Corey, is as I mentioned, we announced that in October. It's essentially a $7 million deal, and just to put some perspective on that, that's actually more than our market cap at the moment. So the deal is essentially for $5 million cash, which obviously will stay with Capella, but also $2 million worth of the Newco shares, remembering that these combined assets will go onto the Oslo Exchange as a Newco. And we will distribute that to existing shareholders because we feel it's the right thing to do. We know that some people have invested in Capella because of those copper assets, so we feel it's only fair that those Newco shares also go out to the shareholders. So as I mentioned, I mean that for a portion of our portfolio, we're getting more than the entire market cap of the company. So that really sort of gives you a reflection of sort of how the markets are. So then, of course, that comes onto the next step, and I guess we'll lead on to that in a moment. But that means that our focus going forward will be on moving our projects in Finland forward, and we have some copper gold assets in the northern part of the country and some lithium assets in the central part of the country. But just to circle back to the NickelX deal, so we do expect to get that closed by late Q1. The plan is to get the IPO away, get the new investors on board, and then that deal should close during March. That's the current expectation. So we're looking forward to that process moving forward, and then our focus will flip across to Finland as in terms of pushing projects forward.
Okay, I was going to ask you about time frame of that deal closing, but you shared that for us. So let's talk about what the company is going to do in Finland then. You do have these copper gold project that I understand you're going to be working on. You also have a partner for the lithium projects. I guess let's start with the copper gold projects here. Do you think you'll be drilling next year? What more steps need to fall in place before you can start drilling?
Yeah, so Corey, so that's a good question. So we have this joint venture with Cullen Resources up in the northern part of the country. So this is up in the central Lapland Greenstone Belt, which is a part of the country where particularly Canadian investors would be very familiar with because there are lots of Canadian juniors and mid-tiers operating up there. You have people, probably the more famous names, amongst the explorers anyway, would be people like Rupert Resources. You also have Orion, you have a few other groups as well, but of course you have some of the mid-tier to larger companies such as Kinross and Agnico Eagle there as well too. So this is a very fertile piece of crust. A lot of people and a lot of new discoveries have been made in the last few years. And I'll talk about that, what our specific goals are here on the next slide. But essentially, the plan is to be drilling here in March on our priority Killero target. And I'll explain a little bit more on that in a moment. And then, of course, in parallel, we will have our joint venture partners, European Energy Metals, pushing forward on the lithium assets in central Finland. They had a very, very busy summer, Corey. So there were a lot of people on the project this year. They really pushed it forward. They had some fantastic results issued about 10 days ago. Some high-grade boulder trains that gave very, very good lithium numbers. And the other thing to keep in mind here too is that this project sits right next to a development project called Keliber. So this is a mine that Sibanye-Stillwater is building. They've just started the building process. So it's the mine, it's a spodumene concentrator, and it's a lithium hydroxide plant on the coast. So we are sitting right next to that. And that is the attractiveness of this project. The fact that you basically are next to all this lithium production and also the lithium infrastructure in terms of concentrators, lithium hydroxide plants, and obviously proximity to coast as well. So really exciting portfolio we have. And I'll just jump onto the next slide, Corey, so we can look at, we'll start from the north and work our way south. So this now is the Central Lapland Greenstone Belt. This is the what we call the Northern Finland Copper Gold Project. We actually have 6 exploration permits issued here. The rock star for us is Killero East, which is this one just sitting here. Now, the backstory behind Killero East is that this is an old Anglo-American target. So Anglo-American had quite an extensive regional exploration project about 10, 15 years ago, at about the same time when they discovered the Sakatti deposit. And here they actually generated very high grade copper and gold in base of till numbers. And just to give you some color to that, Corey, anything over 110 ppm copper in this part of the world for a base of till sample, and just for people who aren't familiar with the geology here, a lot of northern Norway, Finland is just covered with this very thin till cover, which could just be a few meters thick, but it actually obscures the geology underneath. So the bread and butter exploration here is twofold. One is taking samples at that base of till, and the second thing, of course, is geophysics, because we don't have a lot of rock to work with on surface. So basically, Killero East was a very high-grade copper and gold base of till anomaly. It's quite extensive. It's over 1 kilometer long, kilometer wide, and it was never ever drilled at the time. And to be honest, it's one of those targets that you think, well, that really should have been drilled, but that's our good fortune. And the current plan, Corey, is basically to be drilling that here in March. So this is diamond drilling. The plan essentially is to understand the geology, understand where those copper gold numbers have come from, and then once we've got vectors into mineralization, we continue with that drilling. So the plan here is to be drilling here in March. We also have 2 other targets that we'll be doing base of till, just basically early recon work as well on. And just in terms of the lay of the land, so just this map might be a little bit small to see on the screens, but we have Agnico Eagle's their Katilla gold mine sits to the northeast of us. In the northwestern corner of our package, we have an old mine which was owned by Outokumpu called Satapora. It was a copper and gold mine in its day. So again, this just sort of demonstrates the prospectivity, the metal endowment in this belt, which really hasn't been tested properly. So, so from our side, we see a lot of potential in the Central Lapland Greenstone Belt. There's been a lot of discoveries of late, but I think you'll see a lot more discoveries coming out, and hopefully our old Anglo-American target here at Killero East will be the next one. So the plan is to be drilling here in March. That's the plan for Killero East.
Okay. Now, since there is such a focus on Killero East here, and it sounds like really the first pass drilling, how deep are you going to have to drill? How many holes do you want to put into this to get a good understanding of if it even just warrants follow-up?
Sure. That's a good question, Corey. So as this will be the very first drilling ever undertaken on this target, obviously our initial plan is just a scout drill program, a fairly short program of about 2,000 meters to test essentially the main targets, what we perceive as the main targets. But the planning is also, we've thought about this in terms of the idea for drilling in March is that also we should have the IPO closed for the Norwegian assets at that point, and that gives us a little bit more flexibility, a bit more runway to keep drilling on the back of success, right? So that's the reason really for starting here in March. So that we do have that option of, on the back of a discovery, we have the funds obviously to continue drilling. Now, one thing to keep in mind here too is in this part of the world, the best time to drill is winter. So we still have, it's a relatively short window that would take us to sort of April, May at best. But reality is, at least it gives us that little bit of optionality to continue drilling. So, that's why the plan is to drill here in March, because we should have the IPO completed with the Norwegian assets at that time as well.
All right, then you have the cash in the bank to undertake that drill program. What about these other exploration permits? You 5 we can see here were granted back in May. Are you going to be able to drill any of these other exploration permitted areas, or is it more surface work building out drill targets?
Yeah, so the next cab off the rank, Corey, would be Satapora West. So this is basically the northwest extension of the old Urukumpu mine. So what we can see on our ground is extensions of the mineralization coming into our ground from both and here we do have a little bit of outcrop, so we can actually drill here in the summer. So the idea is to basically follow up here, looking for some extensions to the old copper gold mine at Satapora, and that would be during the summer. And so far that looks pretty interesting as well too. Obviously the old Satapora mine was in production for quite a few years. It closed down. I believe it still has resources left. But the idea is obviously now just to continue looking at potential extensions to that. So basically March we would see drilling of Kilero East, and then during the summer at some point we would see Satapora West. It would be the 2 main diamond drill programs that we have planned for on our property in the Central Lapland Greenstone Belt for next year.
Okay, and you already have the exploration permit, so it's just a matter of getting that deal with NickelX closed, getting the money in the bank, and then starting to drill here. Again, very early stage. Let's move on to the next slide. Talk a little bit more about the lithium JVs here, also in Norway again, also in Finland. Take us through what work is going to be done here by the company's partners.
Yeah, sure, Corey. And as I mentioned earlier, this was a really busy summer and autumn for the field crews. So obviously the properties that we control there are very large. I mean, we had something like 2,300 square kilometers, so very, very large area. So the exploration strategy was essentially based on let's go to points of known interest, work away from those. And the other thing too was knowing that we had this Keliber mine being built next door, up in the northern part, let's also have a look on the concessions right next door to that, obviously. So, there is a saying, Corey, the best place to find a mine is next to a mine. So, basically the neurology here in this case has been also a driver, because we can see the geology, particularly in the north, is identical to what they have here at Keliber. And for those who saw that press release from our JV partners about 10 days ago, it actually referred to these high-grade boulder trains being identified right next to the Keliber mine here. So that was kind of a long-winded way, Corey, of saying that we had a very busy summer and autumn. A lot of ground was covered. A lot of targets have come up. As a result of that work, 2 exploration permits were applied for over our northernmost claim, which is called Nabba. And those basically will allow the company, once they're approved, and that normally takes 4 to 6 months, to be able to drill up here. And of course, and one of those exploration licenses corresponds exactly with those high-grade samples that we reported about 10 days ago. I was just on site with the guys about a month ago now, and it's pretty exciting, the stuff they're seeing. I mean, there's some very good, very clear spodumene on surface, these high-grade boulder trains. The other thing which we've also realized is that when you look at Keliber, for example, next door, the amount of distance that the boulders have moved away from the source isn't as great as often you see up in this part of the country. So obviously there's a lot of confidence that these boulder trains we're seeing, the source is somewhere within our concessions. So I guess basically the focus now is with those exploration permits in hand, Corey, we can now go the next step. We can go to drilling, and then of course that's when we start looking for the source and then identifying where these high-grade boulder trains come from. So I think it's an exciting project, and I think it will really, and obviously there's a lot of long-term commitment in that area from both Keliber, which of course is Sibanye-Stillwater, but there's also a lot of community support for this. I mean, people understand the value of these lithium mines. They understand why we need the lithium. And you can see that in the, for example, this lithium hydroxide plant being built on the coast here at Kokkola. And there's a big investment in that district for long-term lithium production. So we look forward to being part of that story as well.
So in terms of your JV partner here, European Energy Metals, they came into these assets in summer, as it says on this slide. Any idea of how much they've already spent just to build up these drill targets, and even what their budget might be for next year?
Yeah, so basically, Corey, so this is their number one project. For listeners who are following European Energy Metals, they probably realize this is the core asset for that company. They do have a couple of other exploration reservations throughout Finland, but this is really the core asset for them. As I say, they had a very busy summer. They probably are very close to that first milestone of earning into the 51%, which is it's a huge ask. I mean, we had basically expected them to get to that point after 12, 18, 24 months. And here we are literally 6 months down the track, and they've already reached that because, they put such an intensive program together and covered an awful lot of ground, which has been great for the project, great for moving the project forward. So basically the advantage, of course, of that is also that, that once they get to this 51%, they become a majority owner, and then they have to continue the earn-in in terms of dollar spend, cash and share payments to us to get to 80%. So that's sort of roughly how the deal is structured. But so far they've had a whirlwind 6 months in terms of really pushing this forward and getting to the point where we now have 2 exploration licenses in the system, with the plan being to drill as soon as those come away. Now, our JV partners, I think they have about 3 million in treasury, so they are fully funded for next year's work program. So I guess that's probably the next thing to add there.
So in terms of Capella's role in these lithium projects, then I understand European Energy Metals, they are earning in here. So is Capella almost in a position of an investor in the company, or are there any cash payments that you might get?
So we will certainly, as I guess the party offering the project. So there are still more cash and share payments to come to us, Corey. So there would be one. Obviously, it's all linked to milestones depending on spend and advances in the project. But the good thing is that yes, they do become a significant shareholder in this project, but we also through that deal become a significant shareholder in them. So at the end of the day, it works out quite well for Capella shareholders as well. So, but in terms of our technical role, Corey, so we assist, we obviously help out where we can. We throw our 2 cents worth in terms of the targeting work. Their exploration manager, Mike Basher, he's a guy with a lot of experience, absolutely first-class professional. And I know the project is in good hands. Nevertheless, it's always helpful to bounce ideas around, and that's what we're here for. But ultimately, they are managing the project going forward.
So maybe back to that first slide, then the overall map of all the company's projects in Finland and Norway. Just remind everybody in terms of news flow, what we can be expecting as we move into 2024.
Yeah, so on the Norwegian side, Corey, so keeping in mind, March really is the critical date for us, that when the IPO, once our combined copper assets and the nickel assets are listed on the Oslo Exchange, that's really sort of a key milestone for us, and we do expect that to happen in March. And then, of course, at that point, we would receive the cash and the shares, which we would onward distribute to Capella shareholders. Coming across to Finland, as I mentioned, we have 2 drill programs in the northern part of the country planned. We have the first one being Hilero, that's the copper gold asset, which was the old Anglo-American target. That is also slated for March, plus some recon work with some base of till sampling on some of the earlier stage targets. And the second diamond drill program up north would be Satapora, which is the extension to the old Outokumpu mine. Then coming down to central Finland, we have, of course, I just was talking about the joint venture with the European Energy Metals. As I mentioned, there are 2 exploration permits in the system. We should get those approved, I would think, sort of Q1, maybe early Q2. And then that means at that point, the company would be free to drill there on those targets. So some good things happening there. And of course, then next summer will also be, there's still a lot of ground to cover out there and a lot of ground that hasn't seen much work, which is really the exciting thing. Corey, it's very difficult to get regional scale plays anywhere on the planet, but it's quite extraordinary to be able to do that here in Finland, I think. So it's a great opportunity, not just for European Energy, but also for us as well. And then in the southern central part of the country, we have the Pero project. We actually just did some initial work on it. We're waiting for some assays. This is work that we did in October, so towards the end of the season, and I'll put an update out on that as well. This is, again, another pegmatite field. It's called the Eräjärvi pegmatite field, and it's something that this is ground that we staked ourselves. And we'll obviously, depending on how the results look, we'll obviously then look forward to pushing that forward in next summer. But certainly, visually, it looked very interesting from what we saw in the field. And so I'm pretty confident we'll be doing some work here next summer as well. So drilling, 2 things to keep in mind. Kylero in March, we've got Satapora in the summer, and we probably also will have diamond drilling at some point after the exploration permits are approved in the central Finland lithium projects. And then Pero, we'll see how we go. We'll design a work program for next summer based on the results that are coming together now from this last sort of late season field campaign that we did.
Okay, Eric, thank you very much for putting these slides together and really sharing the vision for next year for the company. A lot of different aspects going on here, especially after the NickelX. When that IPO closes, it brings money into the company, as well as some shares that will be distributed. And then you can get to work on the copper gold assets and let your partners also deal with the lithium assets. So if anybody listening and watching has any follow-up questions, please email me, fleck@kereport.com. I'll get Eric to address those, and I will definitely follow up, especially when the company starts drilling in northern Finland. Eric, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate this update.
Thanks, Corey. Always a pleasure.